Hello viewers, to another episode of, well, I should say video on the Spearhead channel. On this video I'll be talking about last month's story about how I was forced to quit as the candidate for the Southern Downs for the Australian Labor Party. And I'll be focusing mostly on the Warwick Daily News coverage of the event. On the last video you would have heard my comments about the Warwick Daily News and George Ryan and Jeremy Solars. The Warwick Daily News basically slandered me and misrepresented what I stood for. Especially in their 22nd of February 2012 edition of that paper, they had a picture of me on the front page with the headline Bligh slams extremes candidate, racist rants and homophobic discrimination. As you can see there. For starters, they weren't racist rants or homophobic rants. I was commenting on a matter about the Australia First Party in Queensland back in 2009 about the then State Secretary John Drew. And he was exposed as a homosexual and was forced to resign because the Australia First Party, being a racial nationalist, Australian nationalist political party, does not condone homosexuality. And I'll read you the front page of it. What started as a query from the Daily News has spiralled into a national issue. Warwick man Peter Watson, 19, was forced to resign from his position as the Southern Downs Labor candidate for his involvement with white supremacist propaganda and homophobic rants. Well, I'm not a white supremacist, and I've told the Warwick Daily News that I'm not a white supremacist. What I am is a white Australian nationalist. I just want to keep the Australian nation state and the Australian continent for the white working man and his family. I don't think the white European race is superior to any other race. I think each race has their good sides and their bad sides, but each race should have their own nation. And not just one nation, but many different nations. But we white Australians should have Australia for ourselves. And as for homophobic rants, well, what I said about John Drew on the Slack Bastard website was not a rant. And I spoke to Georgia Ryan, but she only published some of what I said, not nearly all of it. She only edited what she wanted people to hear me say, and then she basically span it to make me out what she wanted people to think I am, if you know what I mean. Was yesterday expelled from the Labor Party. I was not expelled from the Australian Labor Party. I resigned. Peter Shooter, who works for the Australian Labor Party, asked for me to resign, and I resigned. Apparently Anna Bligh said she was furious Mr. Watson had ever been endorsed and would not accept his neo-Nazism and homophobic beliefs in the ALP. I have never said that I was a neo-Nazi. In fact, it's debatable whether neo-Nazis actually exist. But the Warwick Daily News and its deputy editor Jeremy Solars has gotten that wrong. I do not believe in neo-Nazism. As I said, it's debatable whether it even exists. And as for homophobic, well, I think homosexuality is disgusting. So if that makes me homophobic, well, I guess I am. This minutes. Mr. Watson has since told the Warwick Daily News he was glad to have the publicity and was considering joining the Australia First Party. Well, yes, the publicity was good, but unfortunately the media did not publish, only published some of what I said. And they basically spinned it to make people think what the media wanted them to think, which is what they usually do. And on the third page, it wouldn't be an election without some kind of scandal, and Warwick man Peter Watson has sure given upcoming state election its share of controversy. Mr. Watson was yesterday expelled from the ALP and forced to resign from his position as Southern Downs Labor candidate after the Warwick Daily News exposed his involvement with racist propaganda. Well, Jeremy Sollers and George Ryan, the people of the Southern Downs and Scenic Rim, have known that I've been the editor of the Spearhead since the publication first started. And as for racism, well, that was a term coined by a man called Leon Trotsky, the Jewish communist back in the 1910s. The man who murdered millions of Russian Christians during the Russian Revolution, during the Russian Civil War. So that means the man who invented the term racism and came up with the idea of anti-racism was in fact a bit of a racist by his own definition. And all I want to do is preserve my own race, so really if that makes me racist, then I guess I am a racist. But like I said, all I want to do is preserve my own race and nation for the people of my own kind. And that was the whole idea of the White Australia policy. And homophobic discrimination. Well, discrimination means depriving people of something. I don't see why I have deprived homosexuals and lesbians of anything. I haven't deprived them of anything, you idiots. I was having to play with the media reveling in publicity. Well, considering that only 2 journalists actually came to my house, I hardly see that as reveling, don't you think? It's good that I have a platform to express my views. Well, you didn't really give me much of a platform, did you? I am not a neo-Nazi. I am an Australian nativist, well, like what I said, a white Australian nationalist. Those who read his newsletter and blogs may think otherwise. Really? Sydney gay rights activist Gary Burns has called Premier Anna Bligh a buffhead for leading a team that would endorse a white supremacist and a homophobe to run for the Southern Downs. Well, isn't that a bit slanderous, Warwick Daily News? But coming from you, Jeremy Sollers and George Ryan, that wouldn't be very surprising. And the way you wrote it, you reported it as if it was a fact. I'm not a white supremacist. I did tell you guys that I wasn't a white supremacist. He said the comments made by Mr. Watson would have a serious impact on the rest of society. Well, if it means people waking up to how disgusting you people are, well, that's good. The comments made by Mr. Watson to the effect that homosexuality and pedophilia go hand in hand have the potential to incite violence against gay men in particular. Well, considering the male homosexuals are far more likely to be pedophiles compared to male heterosexuals, what do you think? I myself have been bashed and nearly murdered in the past by people who have made that link. Sorry, I don't mind playing the violin. He said he had received numerous calls yesterday from the gay community about the debacle. Oh dearie me. And he said he was concerned with the way the ILP had carried out the candidacy process. Who are they going to endorse next? Someone who wearing a white cape and a hood, Mr. Burns said. Oh well, they've endorsed non-commos in the past. Mr. Watson's father, Dudley, is a former Warwickshire Council candidate. He was also a former Australian Workers' Union local representative, and he also helped found the local Warwick branch of the ILP several years ago, and was the first chairman of the branch, and I was the first vice president of the branch, and later secretary. And it was reported in the Stanthorpe Border Post. And I will now go to the two articles published in the Warwick Daily News on the 23rd of February 2012. The two articles are entitled Horror at Ranting of a Racist Candidate. Oh, Georgia Ryan, you really are incompetent. Non-whites vilified. And they've got a picture of a Jew who works for the ABO legal service here in Warwick ripping up a piece of paper, clearly not the Spearhead. Okay, there is no doubt the Peter Watson political debacle has caused a stir, and as Mr. Watson's history begins to surface, the more the pot boils. Solicitor for the ABO Legal Services, Daniel Haberman, you boy, said he was horrified when he became aware of the newsletter, The Spearhead, of which Mr. Watson is the editor, and disgusted with the views of the former Labour candidate for the Southern Downs. Well, what a surprise, Jews being involved in non-white matters. Always stirring the pot there. Obviously Labour should have done their research, but it's also obvious that it's extremely embarrassing, Mr. Haberman said. This way of thinking is not typical of Warwick way of thinking, and I can't understand why he would do this. Oh, let me see. Aboriginal violence in this town. Asian workers at the meatworks, Big W distribution centre. White liberal do-gooders at the local high school and the local primary schools. Corruption down on local council. Victim groups, and of course cultural Marxism making the white man look like the big criminal. Maybe that's why Daniel Haberman. But of course you wouldn't want to admit to that, because it would undermine political correctness, wouldn't it, Daniel Haberman? Gee boy. It's claiming every... okay, no, hang on. He said the racial slurs that filled the pages were just not true. God! At least not in Australia. What, Detroit? London? But it's happening here in Australia, Mr. Haberman. Where have you been living? Do you have your head up your ass? Good God. It's claiming every Aboriginal in the community is a violent criminal, which is not the case. Well, Mr. Haberman, in no article of the Spearhead have I claimed that every single Aboriginal in this community is a violent criminal. A disproportionate number of them are violent criminals compared to the predominantly white racial demographic of this town, and I have never used racial slurs in any publication of the Spearhead. And you referred to no article of the Spearhead in which, like, you haven't stated which article you think there were any racial slurs published in them. Aboriginal people are always minority on the court list. They might be a minority, but they are a disproportionate large minority. Mathematics people and people that go to court are the exception rather than the rule, where I disagree. He said he could not fathom how Mr Watson classed himself as a traditional Labor supporter. Well, the Australian Labor Party was founded on the principle of keeping this country white and keeping this country for the white working man. Misbehave, man. Go look up your history. Go look up what Jack Lang, Ben Shifley, Dr. Abbott and Arthur Coolwell all said back in the 20th century. And you'll see that I'm right and you're wrong. He said, and this is not traditional Labor policy like he claims. It's so far right-wing. Well, I hate to break it to you, but the Australian Labor Party supported the White Australia policy, and they didn't actually want the dictation test, which was implemented. They wanted an actual ban on non-white immigration to this country. Go look up your history, Mr. Haberman. And the trade union movement in the 19th century wanted some kind of ban on non-white immigration to get rid of the Pacific Islanders up in North Queensland, because they were working less than what the white man was working for. Basic economics. If he was a traditional Labor supporter, he would have been more inclined to side with the underdogs. Well, I wouldn't define the non-whites as the underdogs. I would define people who are living in poverty in this country as the underdogs, because they've been screwed over by economic rationalism. Most right-thinking people think it's outrageous, and I'm just concerned, a citizen who knows what I'm talking about. Yes, and you're a government-funded white do-gooder, liberal, Mr. Haberman. And I go on to the next article, as I said before, entitled Non-Whites Vilified, also written by the female journalist Georgia Ryan. The expulsion of Peter Watson from the ALP has been the talk of the town throughout the country. However, most media outlets have seemingly only covered one side of his beliefs, being his homophobic rants. Bullshit. But what is just as alarming is his hatred of anyone who's not white, is not a white Australian. White should be spelled with a capital letter. I don't hate non-whites, I just don't want them in this country because I want to keep this country white. Emu Vale resident and proud Aboriginal. And why can't white people be proud? Georgia Ryan. Same goes for you too, Jeremy Solars. Roger Knox said he was mortified with the racial slurs that made up the Spearhead. There's been no racial slurs published in the Spearhead. I should know because I'm the editor of Mr. Watson's newsletter. It's not actually my newsletter, it's the local action groups, you stupid woman. It is extremism, and it has got to be stopped. Oh, so much for free speech. It creates a lot of hatred based on someone's pure ignorance. Oh really, Mr. Knox? I have learned to realise that it doesn't work. The more you hate someone, the more you're going to hate yourself. Oh really? We don't need people like that in our community. We're hell tolerant. What a hypocrite, Mr. Knox. Mr. Knox said this was not the first time racism had surfaced in Warwick. On Australia Day, we were at the awards ceremony, and when we came back to our cars, there were these racist leaflets in our windscreens, Mr. Knox said. There is no proof that these were distributed by Mr. Watson, but the leaflets allegedly contained comments similar in nature to those expressed by him. It's just scary. I was shocked. I know that racism is there, but I didn't realise how bad it was. Mr. Watson was expelled from the RV on Tuesday. Well, all I can say is get used to it, because we're going to fight for this country, and we are going to fight here in the Southern Downs and the Scenic Rim. We won't be cowed by the bullshit that is published in the Warwick Daily News. And I don't care if the police come to my flat because I'm not scared of them. And we will keep on fighting until we achieve victory. That will be it. Thank you. Until next time, comrades.